Welcome to the Nightmare Zoo. Please like and subscribe today.
Which cryptid story terrified you as a kid? Sasquatch, werewolves, the Flatwoods Monster? Share the legend that ruined your sleep for a week.
Viewer discretion is advised.
The thing in the box I found while hiking. It ate my neighbors. The forest behind my new house wasn't on any map. The realtor had called it a protected wetland, a vague term that meant the developers couldn't touch it. For me, it was a sanctuary. After the soul-crushing noise of the city, its deep, primordial silence was a balm. I spent my first weekends exploring its tangled depths, following deer trails that vanished into thickets of thorn and ivy. It was on one of these deeper treks that I found the clearing. It was wrong from the first moment I saw it. The trees, a tight-knit army of oak and pine everywhere else, formed a perfect circle around a patch of bare, dark earth. No grass grew there. No insects buzzed. The sunlight, filtering weakly through the thick canopy, seemed to die before it touched the ground, giving the whole space a flat, twilight hue despite the midday sun. In the very center of this dead circle sat a box. It was small, no larger than a jewelry box, and crafted from what looked like tarnished silver. Intricate patterns were etched into its surface spirals that hurt to look at for too long, and angular runic symbols that felt both ancient and deeply unnatural. It was cold to the touch, a chill that seeped into my fingers and bones, not the cool of metal left in the shade. A part of me, the ancient, sensible part that we ignore to our peril, screamed at me to leave it, to turn around and run. But a stronger, dumber part, the part that pokes dead things with a stick, was captivated. It was beautiful, in a sinister way, an artifact, a treasure. I slipped it into my pocket, the cold weight of it feeling like a judgment against my thigh. The walk back felt longer. The forest, once peaceful, now felt watchful, hostile. Twice I spun around, certain I was being followed, but there was nothing there except the silent, judging trees. At home, the box looked even more out of place, sitting on my clean, modern coffee table. The strange symbols seemed to writhe under the electric light. I tried to open it, but it had no visible hinge, no latch. The seam around the lid was hair-thin and seamless. Disappointed, I assumed it was a solid piece of metal, cleverly made to look like a box. I left it there as a curiosity. For 3 days, it sat. And on the morning of the 4th day, I noticed the lid was slightly ajar. I hadn't moved it. I lived alone. A cold trickle of fear, the first genuine one since finding it, dripped down my spine. I approached it slowly. Using the tip of a butter knife, I gingerly lifted the lid. The smell hit me first. It was the smell of a grave opened after a long, wet summer. A thick, sweet, and putrid odor of advanced decay that made my eyes water and my stomach lurch. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like black velvet, was a finger. It was human, or had been. The skin was mottled purple and black, sagging away from the bone in places. The nail was long, yellow, and cracked. It was severed at the knuckle, the end a mess of dried, black blood and gristle. Revulsion overwhelmed my curiosity. I slammed the lid shut, my heart hammering. What kind of goddamn sick joke was this? Who would leave such a thing? I couldn't bring myself to touch it again, to throw it out. The thought of that cold, dead flesh against my skin was unbearable. So, I did the stupidest thing imaginable. I put the box on the highest shelf of my bookcase, shoved behind a row of old novels, and tried to forget it existed. That night, I slept fitfully. My dreams were filled with skittering sounds in the walls, and the image of that rotting finger twitching. I was jerked awake not by a sound, but by a sensation. A profound, unnatural silence had fallen over the neighborhood. The usual hum of distant traffic, the yapping of a dog 2 streets over, the rustle of the wind, it was all gone. It was the silence of a vacuum, of deep space. And then it was broken. A scream tore through the night. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet old woman who grew prize-winning roses. But this sound wasn't human. It was a high, piercing shriek of absolute, unimaginable terror that was instantly, brutally cut off. It was followed by a wet, crunching sound, like a bundle of dry sticks being snapped inside a wet sack. I was frozen in my bed. My blood turned to ice. Then came another sound, a skittering, a rapid, multi-limbed tapping, like many hard, pointed things moving across my roof. It was fast, impossibly fast. It moved from one end of the house to the other, then stopped directly above my bedroom. I heard a soft thud in my living room. Terror held me down for a full minute before a new sound spurred me into action. A child's whimper from next door. The Millers had a 6-year-old girl, Lily. I slid out of bed, my legs trembling, and crept to my bedroom door, peering through the crack into the living room. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated a nightmare. The silver box was on the floor, its lid wide open, and it was empty. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness near the bookcase. It moved into a patch of moonlight, and I had to clamp a hand over my mouth to stop from screaming. It was the size of a large dog, but its shape was a blasphemy. Its body was a distended, pulsating sack of pale, veined flesh, from which 8 long, jointed legs sprouted. They were thin and spindly, ending in points as sharp as surgical steel, and they clicked softly on the hardwood floor. But the worst part, the part that made my mind recoil, was its head. It wasn't the head of a spider. It was the rotting, putrid head of the finger, grown monstrously large. The single yellowed eye was now a cluster of dozens of smaller, black eyes that glistened with malevolent intelligence. Where the nail had been was now a barbed, dripping fang that clicked together with a sound like bones breaking. It tilted its horrible head, as if listening. It had heard the child's whimper, too. With a speed that was a blur, it scuttled across my living room. It didn't open the front door. It simply plunged one of its razor legs through the solid wood near the lock and sliced downward, carving through the door and the deadbolt as if they were paper. The heavy door swung open with a groan. It flowed out into the night. I stumbled to the ruined doorway, my body numb with fear, and looked out. The street was a charnel house. Old Mr. Henderson from across the street was lying on his perfectly manicured lawn. Or rather, half of him was. His legs were gone, and a thick trail of blood and viscera led up his driveway. His eyes were wide open, frozen in a final, silent scream. The thing, the Death Weaver, was already at the Miller's house. It didn't bother with the door. It scrambled up the wall with terrifying ease, its sharp legs finding purchase in the siding. It reached Lily's window and simply punched through the glass with one leg. I heard a new scream from inside her father, which was cut short by a sound I will never forget, the wet, percussive pop of a skull being crushed under immense pressure. This was followed by the sound of wet, sloppy feeding, a grotesque slurping and rending. I backed away from the door, fell to my knees, and vomited on the floor. The sounds from next door were a symphony of slaughter. Crunching, tearing, the high, desperate squeal of their family dog that ended in a sickening gurgle. And then, silence. The skittering returned. It was on my roof again. It was coming back. I scrambled on my hands and knees into the kitchen, my mind screaming one thought: fire. I yanked open the drawer, my hands fumbling for the lighter I used for candles. I grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the counter, just as I heard the thing drop back into my living room through the ruined door. I turned. It stood in the doorway to the kitchen, its multi-eyed head cocked. Its barbed fang dripped with fresh, red blood. Pieces of my neighbors were caught in the coarse, black hairs on its spindly legs. It took a step forward, its pointed leg making a small hole in the linoleum. I screamed and threw the bottle of whiskey at it. It shattered against its pulsing, fleshy body, drenching it in clear liquid. The thing recoiled, shittering a sound like rats gnawing on bone. It lunged. I flicked the lighter and held the flame out. The thing shrieked, an ear-splitting, inhuman sound of rage and pain, and skittered back into the living room. It was afraid of the fire, and the fire made it start to get smaller so. I advanced, holding the tiny flame before me like a holy shield. I backed it toward the open silver box on the floor. "Get the fuck back in there," I shrieked, my voice cracking with hysteria. "Get back in God, damn it." It seemed to understand. It hissed, its cluster of eyes burning with hatred. It didn't want to go back. It wanted to stay out here, in this world of soft, breakable things to eat. I took another step forward, waving the flame. I grabbed a book from the shelf and lit it on fire, holding the makeshift torch. With a final venomous hiss, the monstrosity seemed to collapse in on itself. Its spindly legs folded, its bloated body deflated, and it poured itself, like a liquid shadow, back into the small silver box. The moment the last tendril of it vanished inside, the lid snapped shut with a final, deafening click. I stood there, trembling, the burning book dropping from my hand to smolder on the rug. The silence returned, now thick with the smell of blood, smoke, and death. I have the box. It's in front of me now. I welded it shut inside a steel lockbox, which I've buried in a foot of concrete in my basement. The welds are thick. The concrete is solid. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I hear it. A faint, rhythmic tap-tapping from deep beneath the house. And I know, with a cold certainty that steals the air from my lungs, that it's still hungry. And that steel and concrete might not be enough.
Oh, God damn it, where did Sasquatch hide my human finger snacks?